The Hawker Hurricane was a single-engine, single-seat monoplane fighter designed and predominantly built by Hawker Aircraft Limited, introduced in December 1937, with 14,500 units produced. It proved a practical, rugged design that would see service early with the RAF in World War II against the German Blitzkrieg, forming the backbone of defence in the Battle of Britain, adopting a ground attack role in North Africa, and rushed to Southeast Asia in an effort to curtail the advance of the Imperial Japanese forces. Primarily utilised by the Royal Air Force, Royal Canadian Air Force, and the Soviet Air Forces. The Sea Hurricane variant was used on Royal Navy carriers and catapult-armed merchantman ships. A small number of other Hurricanes made their way into other countries' hands, including Turkey, South Africa, Romania, Yugoslavia, who also built Hurricanes under license, and Finland, who ordered 12 for use against the Soviets during the Winter War. The aircraft itself was designed by Sir Sydney Camm, who leaned on his extensive biplane design experience to create the new monoplane airframe. Indeed, at one time in the 1930s, 84% of the aircraft in the RAF were designed by Camm, with a series of successes such as the Tomtit, the Hornbill, the Nimrod, the Hart, and the Fury. The development of the Hurricane was somewhat tortuous, starting in 1930 with the British Air Ministry issuing specification F730 for a heavily armed day and night fighter. Hawker Aircraft submitted two designs, one a monoplane and the other a biplane, based on the existing Fury. While neither submission was progressed, when specification F534 for a new generation of fighter aircraft for the RAF emerged in 1934, Camm gave his Fury monoplane a new design involving a cantilever monoplane arrangement with a fixed undercarriage, armed with 4 machine guns and powered by the Rolls-Royce Goshawk engine. Alas, his submission failed to impress the Air Ministry enough for a prototype to be ordered. Undeterred, Camm refined his design further with the introduction of a retractable undercarriage and the replacement of the unsatisfactory Goshawk engine by a new Rolls-Royce power plant, initially designated the PV-12, which would later gain fame as the Merlin. By August 1934, a 1/10th scale model of the aircraft had been constructed and dispatched to the National Physical Laboratory at Teddington, where wind tunnel testing verified the aerodynamic soundness of the concept. Encouraged by these results, Camm returned to the Air Ministry in September 1934. On this occasion, the response was favourable, and an order was placed for a prototype of what was now formally termed the Interceptor monoplane in specification F3634. Camm took the proven Hawker biplane construction methods and translated them into a low-wing monoplane built around a steel-tube Warren truss fuselage and thick cantilever wing. This strategy let Hawker move fast and build big, using existing jigs, skills, and factories. While seemingly archaic, the Hurricane's steel-tube fuselage frame, covered with doped linen fabric behind the cockpit, was practical in design and tough in combat, earning a reputation as both a pilot's airplane and a mechanic's friend. In the war theatre, it proved easy to repair and easy to maintain, and often could bring home its pilot, despite severe damage. Small caliber bullets frequently passed through the fabric with little effect, and even cannon rounds sometimes failed to detonate against the flexible covering, giving the Hurricane a resilience out of proportion to its seemingly old-fashioned construction. Ground crews could patch a combat-damaged Hurricane with doped fabric and a few new tubes, turning around an aircraft in hours that might have grounded a more advanced airframe for weeks. The thick wing gave forgiving stall behaviour and superb low-speed handling, letting pilots fight and land from rough fields with confidence. The old-fashioned structure also permitted the assembly of Hurricanes with relatively basic equipment under field conditions. Crated Hurricanes were shipped remotely around the world and assembled on site. The Hawker Hurricane was also the Royal Air Force's first modern 8-gun monoplane fighter entering service just before World War II. The 8-gun configuration the result of research undertaken by Gunner Hill, whose work as a science officer in the Air Fighting Committee in 1934 established the convention that future fighters would need to carry no less than 8 machine guns, each capable of firing at least 1,000 rounds a minute. The prototype, K5083, first flew on the 6th of November 1935, powered by the new Rolls-Royce PV-12 engine, soon to be christened the Merlin. Early trials showed excellent handling and a rock-steady gun platform. With a maximum level speed of 315 miles per hour at an altitude of 16,200 feet, the prototype could climb to 15,000 feet in 5.7 minutes. The trials generated very positive and enthusiastic reports. The Air Ministry's requirement for a battery of 8303 rifle-caliber Browning machine guns to throw a dense wall of fire into bomber formations was accommodated in the Hurricane's thick wing without fuss. However, there was an issue with poor spin recovery characteristics that may have interfered with official approval. Undeterred, in early 1936, the Hawker Board of Directors decided, in the absence of official authorization and at company expense, to proceed with tooling up a production line capable of producing a batch of 1,000 Hurricanes. The spin recovery issue was resolved by research from the Royal Aircraft Establishment with the addition of a small ventral fairing and extension of the bottom of the rudder. Thus, in June 1936, the Air Ministry placed its first order for 600 aircraft. Not terribly surprising, war was looming, and the other submission to F-534, the Bristol Type 146, Martin Baker MB2, Vickers Type 279 Venom, and the Gloucester all failed to proceed past prototypes. This, combined with the delays in production plaguing the submarine Spitfire, made the selection of the Hurricane inevitable. The RAF needed aircraft now, and the Hurricane was ready to go. The Hurricane was fit for purpose, made use of well-proven manufacturing techniques with standard parts. It took just 10,300 man-hours per airframe to produce, thus quicker and cheaper than the Spitfire, and service squadrons were also already experienced in maintaining aircraft structurally like the Hurricane. Hawker also had none of the production scaling concerns of competitors. Overall, some 14,487 Hurricanes and Sea Hurricanes were produced. Most Hurricanes, 9,986, were built by Hawker at Brooklands and Langley factories, while Hawker's sister company, the Gloucester Aircraft Company, constructed 2,750. The Austin Aero Company completed 300 Hurricanes, and the Canada Car and Foundry produced 1,451 units. Indeed, it was just by late 1937, number 111 Squadron RAF received the first production machines, and by the spring of 1939, Hurricanes equipped the bulk of Fighter Command's day fighter squadrons. On the eve of war, over 550 Hurricanes had been produced, equipping 18 squadrons. Britain's front line was, in the main, a Hurricane line. Perhaps the biggest advantage of the Hurricane were that it was a relatively easy aircraft to fly and land, which was a boon when it came to squadrons being flooded with inexperienced pilots. It was a steady gun platform. The closely grouped 303 Brownings created a superior pattern of fire to those of the Spitfire. The initial production version, the Hurricane Mark I, was 32 feet 3 inches long, just over 13 feet high, with a wingspan of 40 feet, and a wing area of 257.5 square feet. Initially powered by a Rolls-Royce Merlin 2V12, producing around 1,030 horsepower. Its top speed was 320 miles per hour at 18,000 feet. Its range was 470 miles on internal fuel, doubled when drop tanks were later adopted. Its service ceiling was around 35,000 feet and had initial armament of 8303 Browning machine guns, 4 per wing. It wasn't long before the Mark I was modernized Adopting the Merlin Mark III engine after just 360 units built, it also moved to a constant speed propeller, adopted metal-covered wings that tolerated higher dive speeds, and paved the path to heavier armament in later marks. 70 pounds of pilot armour, including a pane of armour glass and self-sealing fuel tanks. The supercharger boost was increased to a 12-pound emergency boost. With this, the Merlin III was able to generate 1,305 horsepower in a 5-minute burst. As the war intensified, the Hurricane family evolved rapidly. The Mark II, utilizing the improved Merlin 20 engine, featuring a new 2-speed supercharger, was introduced in September 1940 at the peak of the Battle of Britain. Frustration with the 8-gun configuration failing to consistently bring down targets led to experiments using two 20mm Oerlikon cannons in pods under the wings, but the extra weight and drag seriously compromised the aircraft's performance and maneuverability. The Mark IIB, with a total of 12 303 Browning machine guns, and the 2C with 4 20mm Hispano cannons, solved this issue. They also introduced bomb racks for 2 bombs up to 500 pounds. Alternately, these same racks could mount 245 Imperial gallon drop tanks, nearly doubling the Hurricane's fuel load. But by their introduction in early 1941, their performance was inferior to the latest German fighters, and the Hurricane was changed to a ground attack role. The Hurry Bomber, a versatile fighter bomber, was born. Embracing this role, the Hurricane Mark IID, the famous tank buster, was armed with two 40mm Vickers S cannons and a pair of tracer firing guns for sighting. The Hurricane Mark IV was a universal wing ground attack platform capable of carrying rockets, two 250 or 500-pound bombs, two 45 or 90-gallon drop tanks, 8 60-pounder RP-3 rockets, or 40mm cannon pods with extra 350 pounds of armour and tropical filters, an adaptable end-of-line bruiser. The Sea Hurricane variants 1B, 1C and 2C were strengthened for carrier work with catapult spools and arrestor hooks. Some more were modified for catapult launching off merchant ships as Hurricats to protect merchant convoys. The Hurricane's combat career began in the Phony War over France. Despite the French government requesting 10 fighter squadrons, Air Chief Marshal Sir Hugh Dowding, Commander-in-Chief of RAF Fighter Command, wanted to keep the majority of air forces in Britain for home defence. Thus, initially, only 4 squadrons of Hurricanes were dispatched to France, the first arriving on the 10th of September 1939. And it was just 41 days later, on the 21st of October 1939, that Hurricanes shot down 4 Heinkel HE-115B floatplanes in rapid succession. But it was also here, on December 22nd, that the Hurricane pilots first got bounced by the Messerschmitt Bf 109E. 3 Hurricanes were downed without German loss, as Captain Werner Mulders and his fighter Schwarm executed the doctrine known as boom and zoom. The essence of the bounce was surprise and speed. A section or rotor of 2 aircraft or a larger swarm of 4 would spot enemy formations below, dive steeply to gain velocity, open fire during a brief firing window, and then pull up steeply to regain altitude before the defenders could respond. Instead of turning dogfights, which favoured the more manoeuvrable but slower British Hurricane and Spitfire, Bf 109 pilots sought to maintain energy advantage, a strategy that would prove highly effective, providing the Germans could gain the element of surprise. When the Western Offensive erupted on the 10th of May 1940, Hurricane squadrons bore the brunt of air battles over the Low Countries and northern France. They engaged Heinkel 111s and Dornier 17s, but more dangerously the Messerschmitt 109s and 110s that escorted them. By the 17th of May, the end of the first week of fighting, only 3 of the now 10 French-based squadrons were near operational strength, but the Hurricanes had managed to destroy nearly twice as many German aircraft. Men like Flying Officer Leigh Clisby, credited with 16 aerial victories, in a combat career lasting just 1 month and becoming Australia's first ace of the war, made a brave account before being one of the heavy losses. On the 18th of May 1940, air combat continued intensely from dawn to dusk. The remaining Hurricane pilots claimed 57 German aircraft and 20 probables. The following day, 11 more German aircraft. But over these 2 days, Hurricanes suffered heavier losses, with 68 Hurricanes shot down or forced to crash land due to combat damage. 15 pilots were killed, 8 were taken prisoner, and 11 injured. 2/3 of the Hurricanes had been shot down. Thus, by the afternoon of the 20th of May 1940, the Hurricane units were ordered to abandon their bases on the continent and return to Great Britain. Notably, 178 Hurricanes were abandoned at several airfields in France. Such was the rapid advance of the German blitzkrieg. Through the fighting retreat to Dunkirk, Hurricanes switched fluidly between air superiority and ground attack, strafing columns, bridges and railheads to buy precious hours for the troops on the beaches. Between the 26th of May and the 3rd of June 1940, the 14 Hurricane units operated from British bases were credited with 108 air victories. Indeed, a total of 27 Hurricane pilots became aces during Operation Dynamo, the evacuation from Dunkirk. Here, the introduction of the extra supercharger boost, which increased engine output by nearly 250 horsepower, gave the Hurricane an approximate increase in speed of 25 to 35 miles per hour under 15,000 feet altitude. This greatly increased the aircraft's climb rate and allowed the Hurricane to be more competitive against the Bf-109E. It was also where Sir Keith Park, senior air staff officer to Hugh Dowding, saw his first experience of action in World War II after his appointment as Commander-in-Chief of 11 Group, a remarkable juggling act that required shuttling fighters, often crewed by pilots with limited experience and at the end of their fuel range, back and forth across the English Channel. Park himself was often in the air over Dunkirk, spotting weak enemy positions and taking note of targets for his own pilots. When the order came to evacuate, Park was up in a Hurricane, making reconnaissance missions within range of German guns. He watched the last 2 British evacuation ships set sail, while making a final survey, being the last airman to leave the air over Dunkirk. The Battle of Britain from July through October 1940 was the Hurricane's finest hour. While the Spitfire tangled with the Bf-109s, Hurricanes were often vectored onto the bombers like the Heinkel 111s, Dornier 17s, and Junkers 88s, where their 8 Brownings using the B Mark IV incendiary bullet packed with nitrocellulose were most lethal. The Hurricane's stable gun platform and rugged airframe were perfectly matched to these tasks: close, fire, break, and re-engage. At the start of the campaign, 31 of Fighter Command's 61 fighter squadrons were equipped with Hurricanes, making a good account of themselves, claiming credit for 55% of the 2,739 German aircraft losses. And by now, the Hurricanes learned it could evade being bounced by the Bf-109 pilots by turning into the attack or going into a corkscrew dive, which the 109s, with their lower rate of roll, found hard to counter. If a 109 was caught in a dogfight, the Hurricane was just as capable of outturning the 109 as the Spitfire. Pilot Archie McKellar of 605 Squadron is credited with the most kills in a Hurricane during the Battle of Britain. His Hurricane shot down 19 German aircraft between the 15th of August and the 7th of October 1940. And the only Victoria Cross awarded during the Battle of Britain was to Flight Lieutenant James Brindley Nicholson of 249 Squadron. By the campaign's end, Fighter Command had prevailed. Squadrons manned by exiled Polish, Czech, and other Allied pilots wrung every ounce of performance from their machines, their aggression sharpening the Hurricane's performance. Famously, No. 303 Polish Squadron excelled with its Hurricanes, with 44 verified claims even though it joined the fray 2 months after the battle had begun. From the winter of 1940 to 41 onward, the Hurricane turned from defender to hunter and workhorse. Night fighting Hurricanes, some equipped with early AI radar or simply black painted for night intruder sorties, harried bombers and raiders over the Channel and occupied Europe. The 2C's cannon armament was valuable here. One telling burst could cripple a Heinkel or Junkers in the dark. By the start of 1941, the once seemingly overwhelming threat to the UK was as good as over. RAF Fighter Command formulated more offensive rhubarb operations, improvised low-level strafing attacks against opportunist targets on the ground over occupied Europe. 303 Squadron flew its first rhubarb sortie on the 22nd of January, 1941. 6 Hurricanes, led by flight leader Henneberg, attacking the German-occupied airfield at Cressy, killing 1 ground crewman and destroying 2 Bf-109s, also wounding a pilot. Hurricanes with drop tanks also performed circus bomber escort operations, but as daylight fighting in northwestern Europe tilted toward faster aircraft, including the formidable Focke-Wulf FW-190, Hurricane squadrons were being converted to the Supermarine Spitfire. But far from redundant, the Hurricane found new arenas and new jobs. In the Mediterranean and North Africa, it became the backbone fighter of the Desert Air Force through 1941 and into 1942. The Mark II B Hurry Bomber and Mark II C strafed and bombed supply dumps, columns and airfields from Egypt to Tunisia. The Mark II D tank buster with its blistering underwing 40mm cannon stalked Axis armour. Crews learned to attack from the beam or rear quarter, aiming at engine decks and fuel stowage, then to vanish at low level before light flak could find them, often with other Hurricanes providing air cover. Rommel with his Africa Corps were a fast-moving force. His assault on the Gazala Bir Hakeim line that opened on May 26th soon forced the Allies into a retreat. The action was intense. Commonwealth ground forces began an increasingly rapid retreat from the Gazala line for fear of being cut off by the Africa Corps. Desert Air Force units like No. 6 Squadron had to leapfrog rearwards via a series of landing grounds, sometimes staying for as little as 48 hours. That these were achieved while continuing operations was a credit to the hard-working ground crews. During the retreat and the epic battles of Alam Halfa and El Alamein, the tank-busting Hurricanes of 6 Squadron claimed 26 tanks and 31 armoured vehicles, as well as a swathe of field guns, trucks and other vehicles destroyed. As a consequence, 6 Squadron became nicknamed the Flying Can Openers, an epithet that continues to this day. In recognition of their devastating tank-busting work, Wing Commander Roger Porteous and Squadron Leader Don Weston Burt received the Distinguished Service Order, while the Distinguished Service Cross was awarded to Flight Lieutenants Pip Hillier, Anthony Morrison Bell, Alan Simpson, and Fight Officers Dennis Lee, Theo Peterson, and John Walter. On Malta, the increasingly important sea supply route for the North African campaign, Hurricanes fought a relentless defensive battle through June 1940 to March 1942. Outpaced by later Bf-109 variants, they still inflicted severe losses on bombers and bought time until Spitfires strengthened the garrison. Hurricanes also flew convoy cover and fighter-bomber sorties from the island, punishing Axis shipping in airfields in Sicily and Libya. At sea, the Hurricane extended Britain's reach across the grey Atlantic. Catapult-armed merchant Camm ships flung Hurricats into the air to swat down long-range Focke-Wulf Condors, shadowing convoys in zones safe from land-based escorts. These were one-way missions. If the aircraft were not in range of a land base, the pilot bailed out or ditched near the convoy after the intercept, a non-trivial matter in the freezing North Atlantic. There were 35 Camm ships that made 175 voyages, with just 8 Hurricat catapult launches made. 6 enemy aircraft were shot down by these launched fighters, and 1 Royal Air Force pilot died. With escort carriers entering service, Sea Hurricanes operated from decks, flying combat air patrols to protect convoys and task groups. Their arrestor hooks and tough undercarriages, benefits of Hawker robustness, proved their worth. The Sea Hurricane entered operational service in mid-1941 and recorded its first confirmed aerial victory while embarked in HMS Furious on the 31st of July 1941. Over the ensuing 3 years, Fleet Air Arm Sea Hurricanes played a prominent role aboard Royal Navy carriers, achieving a notably high kill-to-loss ratio. Their successes were concentrated in the defence of Malta convoy routes and in operations flown from escort carriers across the Atlantic. The Hurricane also served extensively in the East. In Malaya, Burma, and over the Indian Ocean, Hurricanes flew against Japanese bombers and fighters in 1942–43. Following the Japanese invasion of the British colonies in December 1941, 51 Hurricane Mark IIBs en route to Iraq were diverted to Singapore, along with 24 pilots who had been transferred to the theatre, forming the nucleus of 5 squadrons. Although rapidly deployed, the Hurricanes, originally intended for the Middle East, were fitted with bulky Vaux dust filters under the nose and were armed with 12 rather than 8 machine guns. The additional weight and drag made them slow to climb and unwieldy to maneuver at altitude. The first Hurricane contact was on the 20th of January 1942, when 12 aircraft of 232 Squadron intercepted a formation of about 80 bombers escorted by fighters, an intended air raid on Singapore. 8 Japanese aircraft were claimed shot down and 3 probables, but 3 Hurricanes were lost along with 2 pilots. Initially, the Hurricanes formed the RAF's Fighter Defence and Escorts for antiquated Vickers Wildebeest biplane torpedo bombers, such as on the morning of January 26, 1942, when a Japanese reinforcement convoy was approaching Endau on the coast of Malaya. Unfortunately, the Wildebeests proved impossible to protect. Approaching the target, the biplanes began to take losses from flak, and the escorting Nakajima Ki-27 Nates found little issue in downing the slow biplane. Malaysia was lost, Japanese raids continued, and, as if to emphasize air superiority, 27 Kanoya Ku bombers with Zeeks as escort plastered Kallang Airport in Singapore. Attacking with impunity and taking out 8 newly arrived Hurricanes, set to replace the Brewster Buffaloes for the New Zealand 488 Squadron. Between the 27th and 30th of January, another 48 Hurricane Mark IIBs arrived with the aircraft carrier HMS Indomitable, from which they flew to airfields near Palembang and Sumatra in Indonesia, then known as the Dutch East Indies. But by early February, the Japanese land forces were besieging Singapore. With airfields now coming under shell fire, it was decided to evacuate most of the remaining fighters to Indonesia. As the theatre matured, cannon-armed 2Cs and rocket-equipped Mark IVs became stalwarts of close air support, ranging over the Arakan and central Burma regions to hammer supply lines, river traffic, and bunkers. On the Eastern Front, in totality, nearly 3,000 Hurricanes reached the Soviet Union via Arctic convoys and the Persian Corridor. With the German invasion of the Soviet Union, the Kremlin requested 3,000 fighter aircraft be provided from the Western Allies, while British Prime Minister Winston Churchill committed 200 Kitty Hawks and 200 Hurricanes to Force Benedict. The initial RAF contingent comprised of just 2 squadrons. Number 81 and Number 134 Squadron arrived in Murmansk in early September 1941. Although the RAF pilots' primary objective was to train Soviet pilots to fly the Hurricane, by the time they completed their mission and returned to the UK in December, they had shot down 16 German aircraft for the loss of only 1 Hurricane. The first Soviet victory in a Hawker Hurricane was recorded in early October 41, when Lieutenant D. Sinev shot down a Messerschmitt Bf-110. By the end of the month, the 78th IAP's pilots claimed a further 8 German aircraft shot down. Throughout the winter of 1941-42, the Soviet Hurricanes suffered heavy losses against the highly trained Luftwaffe pilots, but a significant number of Soviet pilots would earn their proverbial stripes in the unpopular British fighter before transitioning to P-39s, P-40, and more advanced Soviet-built fighters. With Hurricanes transferred to PVO air defense units around Moscow, Murmansk, Leningrad, and Stalingrad. Much like the British found, the 8 or 12 303 rifle-caliber machine guns of the Mark IIs provided underwhelming effect. Consequently, Soviet ground crews started to remove some of the Browning machine guns, mounting two 12.7mm Berezin UBs, or 2 or even 420mm Schwack cannons in place, but overall performance deteriorated as a result, further eroding its reputation. Nevertheless, Hurricane deliveries continued, and several frontline fighter regiments flew the aircraft until mid-1944. Beginning in late 1942, the UK started shipping Hurricane Mark IICs, armed with 4 20mm cannon, to their Soviet allies, the majority of which were sent directly to PVO units. In April 1943, an agreement was reached that saw the delivery of 60 Hurricane Mark IIDs, the tank buster ground attack variant that was armed with two 40mm Vickers S guns. In early 1944, the 246th IAP was equipped with the tank buster Hurricanes, though ultimately, due to the Hurricanes' reputation with the Soviets, the heavy ground attack variant was not used operationally on the Eastern Front. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you'd like to see more like this, please subscribe to the channel. And if you have more insights, memories, or sources on this remarkable aircraft, I'd love to read them in the comments. In the